The MSR consistent and inconsistent behaviors are where the evaluation framework meets reality. The behavioral statements tell you what to look for. The MSR behaviors tell you what it actually sounds like when you hear it, and what it sounds like when something's off. At MCC, the inconsistent behaviors are the most subtle in the entire credentialing system. Understanding them is the difference between evaluating at MCC level and evaluating at PCC level while holding an MCC form. This is a pattern you've seen twice already. At ACC, inconsistency meant absence. The behavior simply wasn't there. The coach didn't explore the agenda, didn't paraphrase, didn't invite reflection. At PCC, inconsistency meant misdirection. The behavior was present, but the coach's agenda was running the session instead of the client's. At MCC, inconsistency means something more subtle: residual methodology. The coach is still doing coaching rather than being a coach. The coaching is good, perhaps excellent, but it's visible as a technique rather than a natural response. That visibility is the inconsistency at this level. There's one thread running through nearly every competency's inconsistent behavior list at MCC: responses that are general rather than deeply customized to this specific client's words, concepts, and ways of being. At ACC, general responses were acceptable if the right behavior was present. At PCC, customization was expected. The coach should use the client's language, reference their specific situation. At MCC, anything less than deeply personalized response is inconsistent. The coach's questions, observations, and reflections must be so calibrated to this person that they couldn't be transplanted to another client without losing their meaning. C3, inconsistent at MCC. The coach subtly or overtly influences the client's choice of how they use their session. Notice subtly. At PCC, the concern was overt direction, the coach steering the agenda. At MCC, even subtle influence is inconsistent. A slight lean toward one topic, a follow-up question that gently channels the exploration in a particular direction. Complete client autonomy is the standard. The coach might ask one open question and then trust whatever the client brings. If the coach's question shapes the direction even slightly, that's inconsistency at MCC. The client must own every turn of the conversation. C4, inconsistent at MCC. The coach's behavior reflects lack of curiosity and prioritizes their own interpretation of the client. At MCC, curiosity isn't a technique you deploy when you remember to. It's the relationship posture itself. Its absence reveals something fundamental. The coach is performing partnership rather than living it. The distinction is sharp. A PCC coach who asks good questions about the client's experience is demonstrating curiosity. An MCC coach whose entire way of being in the room communicates genuine fascination with who this person is. That's the consistent behavior. When that fascination drops, the inconsistency is visible to a calibrated evaluator. C5, inconsistent at MCC, uses a predefined approach rather than working with what emerges in real time. No template, no formula, no habitual structure that the coach brings to every session. MCC presence means everything arises from the moment. This is where residual methodology is most visible. A coach who has a reliable process they bring to sessions, even an excellent, well-tested process, is demonstrating PCC-level presence. At MCC, the structure dissolves. The coach responds to what's in front of them without reference to any model, even an internalized one. The model hasn't gone away. It's become instinct rather than framework. C6, inconsistent at MCC, appears to be listening for an opportunity to demonstrate knowledge or tell the client what to do. This is the most damning MCC failure mode. The coach who listens brilliantly, catches every nuance, tracks every thread, but uses what they've heard to show how insightful they are rather than to serve the client's growth. The listening serves the coach's cleverness. At PCC, this might be a C7 issue. At MCC, it contaminates the listening itself. The purpose behind the listening matters as much as the quality. If the intent to demonstrate knowledge is there, even subtly, the listening is inconsistent. C7, inconsistent at MCC, drives the client towards solutions without hearing whether the client still needs deeper thinking, feeling, or sensing. Rushing to insight is a PCC habit that must dissolve at MCC. At PCC level, helping the client reach awareness efficiently is a strength. At MCC, efficiency is not the value. Trust in the client's pace is. The MCC coach trusts that the client's exploration has its own timing. Even when the coach can see the insight before the client reaches it, they don't accelerate the journey. They hold the space and let it arrive when the client is ready. That patience, that trust, that's consistency at MCC. C8, inconsistent at MCC, suggests or provides specific actions rather than partnering with the client to create their own. At MCC, any prescription is inconsistent, period. Not some prescription, not most, any. This includes well-intentioned suggestions disguised as questions. Have you considered trying X? Is a suggestion wearing a question's clothing? The coach who facilitates growth at MCC level creates conditions where the client generates their own actions from their own insight. The coach's contribution is the quality of the space, not the content of the plan. Anything that introduces the coach's ideas about what the client should do is inconsistent. C1 at MCC is not a numbered scoring system. The MCC BAR's resource guide handles ethics through behaviors consistent and behaviors inconsistent narrative lists. Behaviors consistent. A strong understanding of and alignment with the ICF Code of Ethics, consistently in the role of coach, using key coaching skills to facilitate the client's own insights. Behaviors. Inconsistent. Clear violation of the Code of Ethics. The coach's focus is primarily on telling the client what to do or how to do it. Consulting mode. The conversation is based primarily on the past, particularly the emotional past. Therapeutic mode, or the coach primarily gives advice or tells the client what to do throughout the session. The ICF disqualifiers clause sits in the candidate guides at every credential level. Identical text in the ACC, PCC, and MCC handbooks. Recordings may be disqualified if the assessor finds an ethics breach or evidence the coach more than occasionally steps out of the role of coach. What is unique to the MCC source is the explicit enumeration of the failure modes the assessor weighs against that clause. The phrase that matters in the MCC behaviors inconsistent list is primarily and throughout the session. Brief, momentary step-outs from coaching happen in any real session and do not invoke the clause. A sustained pattern of consulting or therapeutic mode is what an assessor weighs. Here's the pattern I want you to sit with. The MCC inconsistent behavior list reads like a description of very good PCC coaching. Asking shaping questions, bringing structure to exploration, offering insightful observations, helping the client reach solutions efficiently. At PCC, these are strengths. At MCC, every one of them is inconsistent. The threshold moves. The failure modes become the habits that were strengths at the level below. That's why MCC evaluation is the most demanding task in this program. You have to see past excellence to identify what mastery actually requires. What passes at PCC becomes what fails at MCC.